All right, so we can get started. This recording is going. So this is just going to be really specific to the climate report and just a quick build. Now you don't have to build it the way that I'm going to build it, but I think just looking at what you had in your files, Veronica and stuff like that, these are going to be. This is just sort of a step by step that I think if you follow it along, you'll be able to catch up really quite quickly. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a new book. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is just creating a new book, and I'm going to save it in my working folder. So this is my local drive. Okay, so you might have it organized something like this, and I'm gonna say IPCC report. I'll just call it Rev2, just starting fresh. Okay, so I'm just going to make a folder for it, and now I'm going to save my book as IPCC climate report. I'm just calling it rev2.indb. So I'm starting with my book. That's the first thing I'm doing. Okay, so that's just gonna, all that's gonna do in InDesign is just open up this blank book kind of palette, which has no documents in it. Okay, so now I'm gonna make my first document. And I'm going to change the units to inches because for some reason my copy of InDesign defaults to picas. I'm just going to call this my style guide. That's all it is. I'm just going to build up a style guide InDesign document that I'm then going to use as my style source. Okay, I'm going to make it facing pages. It's going to be vertical portrait orientation. It doesn't have to be. You could do a landscape orientation if you wanted to, but I'm going to do facing pages. And I'm going to give myself 4 pages to get started with. I'm going to need a lot more than that down the road, but 4 is fine for now. And I'm going to set my bleed and my margins. Okay, so my bleed I'm going to want at about 1/4 inch, so 0.25 inches. And I'm going to reset my margins anyways once I'm actually got the document set, so I'm just going to leave it at the default, whatever it is, because we're going to change that later. I'm not going to worry about the slug. We can have slug all set to 0 because we're not going to be using that. Okay, so create. I'm going to save the document before I do anything, and I'm going to go to my Electronic Design 2 folder, and I'm just going to call this, it's style guide, and this is my INDD document, so it's my first document. Okay, now I'm going to add that document to my book. Then again, InDesign just doesn't remember where you last saved a file, so you've got to continually keep going back to your folder. It's kind of annoying, but it is what it is. Okay, so now my style guide is part of the book. Save the book. So now save that link. So my local file structure, if I go back over to Windows, okay, this is my working folder. It looks like this. I've got my INDB book, and I've got my INDD style guide. So those my book file, my first kind of style guide InDesign document. So you can see book file. And when you see a lock file like this, it just means that that file is open, so you can't move it or change the name while it's open, while there's a lock file in place. So I've got my basic pages. I'm going to bring up my pages palette here so we can see that I've got my 4 pages that I've created that are all just using that basic margins and style guide. So the first thing I'm going to do is organize my grid and set up some basics on my master style. So I'll double click on the master style to open up my facing pages template spread. Okay, I'm just going to minimize this book because I don't need that open right now. Move that off to another screen so it's out of the way. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go View, Guides and Grids, Show Document Grid. So I'm just going to use my document grid as my base grid for this design. I'm not going to get too crazy or fancy with it. We don't have to. But the first thing I like to do is make sure that I have Guides and Grids, Snap to Document Grid turned on all the time. And then I'm going to grab the origin of the rulers here. So right up in the upper left-hand corner, we're going to click and drag right down to the middle of the spread. That's going to set our 0 point on our grid so that it counts up to 8.5 from the origin of the spread. Okay. Right, so what's my next thing I'm going to do? I'm going to go in and I'm going to set my inside margin and my outside margin. I'm going to basically modify the margins. Okay, so layout, margins and columns. So my top, I think maybe I'll just do a 1/2 inch from the top. I want the inside to be, I'm going to click the link so that they're not linked so I can have them be different. I want my inside to be 1 inch. And I want my outside to be, I think a 1/2 inch is fine, and my bottom, I think I'm going to make that 1 inch as well. And I'm going to divide this spread into 2 columns, and I'm going to set the gutter width to 0.25. I'm going to do a quarter inch gutter. That's just so it lines up on my grid. So that's edited the margin and the layout for the left-hand side of my spread on my main page style. I'm going to now do the same thing for the right-hand side. By double-clicking on the right-hand side, layout, margins and columns. Okay, 0.5, inside is 1, outside 0.5, and the bottom is 1. Oh, I forgot to set my column to 2, so let's go back to layout, margins and columns, 2 column, 0.25. I mean, this is just building a grid off of the very, very default kind of settings. Okay, so now if I just were to use this throughout my whole document, that'd be good enough. I do like to make myself a version that is 3 column grid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple more things on my master style before I move on to making a B master, but I'm just going to put my page numbering in here. So I'm just going to put this page, insert, type. Actually, I want to show my hidden characters first, and then type, insert, special character, markers, current page number. We're going to go through and apply our styles to that later, but for now I'm just going to make sure that I've got a page numbering. Oh, that's not where I want it. I want it on my master style, sorry. So I'm going to just Control X, double click into my master guide, paste that down. So when you have a marker, it just says A because that reflects A master. I'm going to go put it on the right hand side over on the other side of the spread, which is B. I'm going to right align that, just so they both kind of line up there. I don't know that I want them right on my margins though, so I'm just going to use the selection tool, select them both, and just move them down one grid. So they're kind of placed off my margin. I might move those around later, but right now I'm just getting the very basics in place. So now every page will be automatically numbered in this section. Okay. So from here, I need some type and things like that to start building out my styles, but I'm going to grab that from the main content document. But first thing is I'm just going to save my style guide so that it's my style guide. And in my book window, where my book is, here it is. You can see that I've got this set to indicates the style source, so it's just by default building out the style source. So that's the first thing. So I'm pretty much ready to start building out my style guides, but I might as well use some real copy to do that. So let's just go over to the Google Doc, which is our source content that we're all using. Okay, and looks like a couple of people have made copies of the file. That's fine. I mean, I think our main one here that we've been working with is the one that Lath is set as the owner, I think. Yeah. Okay, so this actually isn't fully cleaned up. I'm going to go back because I'm not super sure what happened to the version of mine. It was a little more cleaned up than the IPCC report cleanup right here. Okay, So this is a document you should be working with. So the one, I mean, these ones other people have made, I'm not super sure what those are all about, but you want to be using IPCC report text cleanup as your main source content. Okay, so I'm just gonna select all, Control A, copy, just to really get it going quick. And I'm gonna go on my first page, and I'm gonna start a text object, basic text object. I'm not gonna do any styling, just stick it in there. And I'm going to now click on the bottom anchor, the text threading anchor. I'm going to just auto thread my first text block here. Okay. So now I can just double click in there with the text editor so I can see my end of story hidden character there, which means I don't have any content in it yet. And it's just going to go in as my basic. In terms of my paragraph styles, when I paste it in, it's going to use the basic paragraph, and we're going to actually style up our basic paragraph because it's always built in by default. You might as well use it. So paste. So the default basic paragraph doesn't have really any styling applied to it. It's 12-point Minion Pro, pretty big for body copy. So I'm going to go in and start just changing it. So I'm going to double click on basic paragraph. And I'm going to just go through and do a couple basic things. I'm going to change my basic to 9-point, which is much more in line with somewhere between 8 to 9-point for reports like this. For body copy is pretty typical. And I think I'm going to want to use a serif font, but I don't think I want to use Minion Pro. I think I want to use something that is a little more I don't know. I'm gonna just take a look through it. Look at my available substyles. I kind of want my main body copy to have at least 3 or 4 different weights available, and just look at it for good legibility. I'm gonna see what Garamond looks like. That's a pretty typical one. But Garamond only gives me regular and bold, but for body copy, that's fine. So maybe I'm just going to stick really, really basic. So that's the font. Now I'm going to go down to my indents and spacing. I'm going to use regular left alignment, just the default, and I'm going to add some space before and space after. So you can increment that up like that. And that's basically going to, by default, give you just a 1/4 inch between each paragraph break, which is pretty good. And I think that's pretty much all I'm going to be worried about in my basic paragraph for now. Okay, so that's my first step. I've got my basic paragraph. I've selected my font. If you're not super sure about what font to use, remember I'm recommending that you install and use fonts from fonts.google.com to pick your body copy. But you should have fonts installed on your system that you can use for this. So at this point, I'm hoping you got that styled up. So from here now, I'm just going to make a couple more styles. I'm going to say, well, we've got if we go back over to Google Docs, we've got a title style, we've got a heading 1 style, we've got a heading 2 style. That's what drives this table of contents here, and it's also how we know how to section out our content in InDesign. So we're going to make styles that match heading 1, 2, and 3. In terms of the name, we obviously don't need to match them in terms of the font. We can pick whatever we want for that. So I'm going to go back over to InDesign, and I'm going to make a title style. And I think for my title, I'm going to use a sans serif font. And what you're seeing I'm doing here is just what's called inline styling. So I'm doing that, and then I'm going to then create a paragraph style after I've done my inline styling. So I think for my title, I'm going to use this font called Archivo Black. I'm going to make it big. Like 32 point. And right now you can see it's just showing me an override on basic paragraph, right? And that's fine. I'm going to just now select that whole paragraph block, and I'm going to say new paragraph style. I'm going to call it title. And that's it. Everything else I've already done, so it's all going to inherit to that style. So there's that style. Okay, I'm then going to make heading 1, I'm going to base it on title. It's just going to be a smaller version of the title. So I'm just going to say new paragraph style, heading 1, based on title, but it's not going to be I want my next style to be basic paragraph, and that should have inherited. Oh, I guess it's because I've got this selected. Anyways, I'll just change it here. And I'm going to make it like 12 and 16, let's call it. Okay, so there's my heading 1 style. Heading 2, right here, executive summary, I believe was heading 2. Let's go back and double check that. Oh, this was heading 2, the global climate in 2015. That's what we're looking for right there. So this is our H2. So I'm just going to click heading 1, but now I'm going to make the font like 12 point for my heading 2, so it's kind of obviously sub to the forward. I think I'm going to make it maybe 11 point. Okay, so then I'm going to make new paragraph style, heading 2. Based on heading 1, next style is going to be basic paragraph. Okay, so there's my heading 2 created, and I think there's an H3 level. Let's just go back and double check that. So it looks like down here we've got H1, H2, H3 greenhouse gases. That's kind of our first H3 under key findings. So I'm just going to go find greenhouse gases and add that. Somebody got a question there?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, so now that you have that set up, can you highlight anything in your report, click the paragraph style, and it'll make it that size and font?
That is exactly what it is all about, yep.
Okay, cool, yeah. I don't know, paragraph styles have seemed less important to me, but this explanation just kind of showed how boss they are actually. So.
Yeah, they're probably your most important style. They really will speed up most of your formatting and cleanup. Okay, so now I'm just going to continue on making a new paragraph called H3 or heading 3, which is based on heading 2, and I want my next paragraph style to be basic paragraph. And you know, I'm probably going to change the color of it, but I'm going to do that with a character style because I want to give myself some flexibility in terms of just using this spacing, but I want to be able to change the color for different sections. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the space after for my H3, and I think the space before can be fine. All right. So those are my basic paragraph styles: a title and heading 1, 2, and 3. That's pretty much it. I mean, I'm going to make other paragraph styles like footnotes or whatever, but from here, I can kind of test those styles out by just going through and now just actually floating out the sections, right? So I'm just going to continue threading my content. And you know, I've got lots of empty paragraph blocks, so while I'm doing this, I might as well just go through and clean out those empty paragraphs because we don't want anything. We don't want empty paragraphs in our content, so we're going to go through and clean up. This is all just going to be a table, so I'm just going to delete that all out of there, and I'll know to go and grab that from my table. But while I'm at it, I'm just going to tag that with heading 3 just so I don't miss them. And you can make a shortcut for your paragraph styles if you want. And if you're using the advanced layout, you've also got a paragraph style selector up here, I think, as well. I don't know, I don't use it very often, as you can see, but I think these are character styles only. But yeah, you can assign a shortcut, like a keyboard shortcut to go through, but yeah. So yeah, some of this inline content here, you know, these are tables that are going to come out, so we just might as well delete those out of our body copy while we're going there. As well, all these figure 1, they're going to need to be broken out into their own text objects, and I probably need to come up with a paragraph style for these figure labels, right? But for now, I'm just kind of cleaning up the copy a little bit as I go. All right, so I've got one more page here, and then I can continue on to make more. But I mean, when you're floating a really long document, it is possible to have InDesign automatically add all the pages that you need. If you set up your master style with threaded text blocks, it will do that. But it can be a little bit complicated, and I also want you guys to understand how to manually thread your text. So it's better to do it this way, just because it gets you comfortable with it. Okay, so now I need one more page. So what do? I go to my pages and I grab the right-hand spread and just pop a page in there. But I can then add a bunch more spreads if I want, just by dragging that spread down. So that might be enough. I mean, I'm going to break this up into sections, but I'm kind of just doing formatting because my basic styling is done. I just want to have at least a few sections with the styles applied, so I can then start to work with them and refine them. This is kind of the most manual way to float the whole document into InDesign. I mean, you can also double click and it'll automatically set the text object to fit your guides. I think that should be enough for now. I mean, like I said, I'm gonna break this up into separate files later. But so basically, I've got my character styles in place, or my paragraph styles, my basic title 1, 2, 3, and now I kind of, like I was saying, I want to go through and apply some color and stuff like that. So let's just each 2. So let's say have I added any? I haven't even really defined any color swatches. You know, we had in the assignment 3 we had sort of picked our colors and whatever, but I haven't done that yet because I'm just starting fresh. But I mean, it's real quick to do. I mean, I'm just gonna get rid of the default here. That's my nice clean basic color palette, and then I'm going to use Pantone Connect plugin to put in some spot colors. So I'm going to go color bridge coded, and I'm going to pick some colors. So I think I kind of want blues and greens. So let's grab this one. A lighter blue here. Those 2 colors are in there, so good enough. I can work with those now. So all I'm going to do in my character styles, just for changing the color of the text, I'm just going to add a new character style. I'm just going to call it blue. You can call it whatever I want. I could call it from the color, whatever. And I'm not going to change any of the other attributes for this. I'm just going to go and change and select the blue, and that's it. Just giving it a fill color. So now I can use my character styles to change how my paragraph works without overriding it, right? So I could then, if I wanted forward to be blue, my character style is blue. Now you can see how also if it'll only apply to just the characters you select, it doesn't automatically apply to the entire paragraph tag. Make one more. I'll make a new, and then kind of a new character style called green. I'll just use the other. I guess that's more of a teal, isn't it? Not the best color palette, really. It's okay. So then if I want to override these in terms of color, then I can just select those and apply teal. Now, if I wanted every one of my H3s to always be that color of teal, my H2s, then I can apply the color in the paragraph style too. I mean, if you're going to do it globally, then you can do that. And then if you just add your character styles for overrides. So just think about character styles as sort of existing to override things. Okay. So my next thing then is to take a look at basic object styles. Like most of the time I'm probably not going to be wanting to run my text across the full column. I'm going to want to do a 2-column break, right? So this is where you can basically have your basic text frame. Okay, so we're going to, first I'm going to just set up, I'm going to right click text frame options. I'm going to change it to 2-column and a 0.25 gutter so that it lines up with my grid. Okay, so that's all I got to do there. So just like that. So basic text frame. That's pretty much what I'm going to do because I'm gonna want all of my text frames to be 2-column by default. That's just my desire for this particular design, this style guide. So let's go down and go to the text frame general options, which I think has a column of 2 and 0.25. Let's clear the overrides. Not entirely sure why that was a basic text frame. Anyways, my basic text frame is now, like when I create a basic text frame, it should create it with 2 columns. Yep. So I can create as many new text frame styles if I want. If I wanted a 3-column one or whatever, I could do that. Based on my basic text frame. But yeah, you can just go through and then just kind of continue floating the content. So you can literally do it page by page like this. There's nothing wrong with working through your document and just applying your styles as you go. And then if you want to change your mind, or if you sort of feel that you need to modify some styles, you kind of work back through it. So that's all really sort of the assignment 4 level really needs to get to, is just having some paragraph styles, having at least a master style page like this, right? So then my next step from here would probably be to make a 3-column version of my master style, which I could use sometimes. So I would just duplicate this A master. It's going to call it B master. I'm going to, with both of them selected, go to layout, margins and columns, change the column to 3. And I think in order to get those to line up, how small am I going to need to make those? I think I'm going to need to make them 0.6. I mean, like I say, I do typically like to divide my grid into 10 just because it's a little easier to do these kind of fractions of an inch that way. Or if you want to go completely crazy, you could do it in metric, which is of course quite a bit easier to work with than inches. But for whatever reason, Imperial still kind of rules the day. There we go. So typically when I do a 3-column grid, I kind of want my column spacing to be narrower because this is going to be for more dense content. So that's just what my 3-column version is. So now I've got those 2 styles, and I can kind of continue on from there. So now if I want to like style up my page numbers or whatever, I can add these things to my master guide. But really, at this point, I've essentially got what I need to continue working on the report. I'm going to need to do a few more paragraph styles for the footnotes and things like that. But I'm just really at this point, I'm just deciding to use my grids. If I want to use a 3-column, if I want to split to 3-column. So for an example, I think maybe 3-column. I don't know if any of the content here would make sense. Yeah, don't know. There was some content that's sort of more like references and sources. I think that's where I'd use my 3-column style. But you can say just arbitrarily, if I wanted to change this section to use a 3-column, like this page 6, I just go grab B master and just drag it and apply it to that page, and that's going to give me the 3-column style. If I want my text to match that, text frame options 3.125, and now that 3-column text now fits, right? So you can see how it goes pretty quick from here. I just go through, apply my styles as they need to be applied, and then start work. Once I've got that, then I can start kind of working on each of my individual sections with a little more detail. Just kind of styling things up more, either by applying overrides or creating new character styles and graphic elements and put them all in there. But I don't think I mean, that's really where you need to get to. You've got your style guide. So from here, I could just save it, break it out into sections. I mean, I'd kind of like you guys to break out your book into multiple InDesign files. So I would follow basically everything in the report that is, that kind of makes sense. Like obviously key climate indicators, well, that's a section. So that goes from temperature, and then ocean, cryosphere, precipitation, extreme events, and I think that's pretty much it. Attribution, highlights, those, and references. Those would all make sense as individual InDesign files that you then add to your book, so that you can kind of break it down into sections. So does that help you, Veronica and Tyler? Like, that's pretty much all there is to it in terms of getting your basic style guide, so you can